Hi, I'm Diane Dayton. We're at the 18th Annual VF Outlet Berks Jazz Fest in Reading, Pennsylvania. With us right now is keyboardist Gregg Karukas. Thanks for being with us,
Diane.
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Great.
Great show today with the LA Philharmonic.
Thank you. A lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Well, let's talk a little bit more about you. You were coming out with your 11th album later this year, right?
Yes. I'm working on it right now as we speak. Well, not as we speak,
but
as soon as I get home.
Sure. So what's this album going to be about?
More of the same,
Okay.
which for me is just trying to write great songs.
Okay.
And I take my time doing it. It's sort of like, you know, I hear from people say, when are you coming out with your next CD? You know, and it gets to be 2 years between CDs, 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Not as rapid as most people,
Okay.
or as some people that I know. But, you know, you can't rush it
No.
when you want to have the best songs. I write a lot of songs,
Okay.
but I tend to just write something and I'll come back and listen to it a few days later, and I'll just sort of let it sit, and I'll just put it on a shelf and go back and listen to them. And if I like them, like if that happens 3 times where I go back and listen to it and I think, yeah, I like this a lot, then that's something I know I'll develop and I'll turn into a full-scale, you know, production.
Yeah. Well, you grew up in the Maryland area,
Yeah.
but in the mid-'80s, you moved on out to California. What took you out to California at that time?
Well, you know, I had really kind of gone to the top of the scene in Washington, D.C. with a couple of different original bands. And one of them, I was actually just joking with Michael Manring, who's also here at the festival.
Okay.
Michael Manring was the bass player in that band called
really?
Natural Bridge.
Okay.
Yep, he joined when he was like 17 or 18. And we broke up that band in about 82. And at that point, I said, you know, I want to do something different. And it was either go to New York, where I had spent a good bit of time visiting and hanging out and playing, or Los Angeles, where I had never been. And New York, I knew for sure, because I'd been there so many times. Being a keyboard player in New York City, when you have a Fender Rhodes piano and synthesizers, and you got to get from one part of the city to the other and lug these big keyboards around, was not going to be fun, especially considering the crime rate in New York was so high.
Sure.
You know, you can't leave anything on the street for a minute.
No.
So I had experienced that.
Okay.
So I said, well, why don't I go to L.A.?
Uh-huh.
And I didn't know too many people. I only knew really 2 people. But they turned out to be very important people. One of them is Russell Ferrante from the Yellow Jackets. And another friend of mine who was a piano player, but not a famous guy, but who put me up for 2 months. He let me stay at his place. And he had a piano, so I practiced all day.
Yeah.
And thanks to Russell, really, totally, you know, Russell recommended me to some very great people, Shelby Flint, who he had been playing with. And he was getting too busy with the Yellow Jackets, and he said, call Gregg.
Yeah.
So I got the call my 4th day in Los Angeles, and my 12th day in Los Angeles, I was playing a show with Shelby Flint and a host of incredible Los Angeles musicians at Dante's, which was the top club in L.A. And so that started it all, and I met Richard Elliott at like our 3rd gig. We did a double bill with Kitty Hawk, which was a band that Richard played with. And I met Richard, and then I started playing in Richard's band, and things just went from there.
Oh, wow, that's great. The Rippingtons.
And the Rippingtons was later on, a little bit later on,
But you were one of the original members,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I had been playing around with my own band a bit and with every other band. I mean, everybody who's big now on the bill of the Berks Fest started in the clubs. Not everybody, but all the people from Los Angeles started in the clubs. So we all played in each other's bands. I mean, literally, Gary Meek was the first sax player in my band, and he's gone on to play with Lorber and Bromberg. And Dave Koz was the second saxophone player to play in my band.
Right.
And so we all kind of go back, and this club scene was happening between a couple clubs. And I had heard on the radio station, which was a Quiet Storm station then, before they even had a name of Smooth Jazz.
Right.
I had heard Russ Freeman's first solo record. They were playing a song. And I said, that's cool. That's what I like. I want to meet this guy.
Yeah.
And just by coincidence, not a month later, I get a call from Russ. A couple of the guys, Tony Morales, who was playing with him. I had been playing with Tony and his wife, Lorraine Feather, in a band called Full Swing.
Okay.
And so Tony recommended me to play with Russ Monday nights at the Baked Potato. And it wasn't the Rippingtons. It was just Russ's band.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
okay, fine, go play. Brandon Fields, who I'd been playing with. And so we played every Monday for a good, I would say, 9 months.
Yeah.
And then Russ got a record deal to do a record for Japan. And you may have heard the story, but it was originally just going to be called Something Different, not Russ Freeman, because he had a contract for Russ Freeman. And so the Japanese people called. He was literally speaking to them on the payphone of the Baked Potato while we were doing a sound check in the afternoon. They says, "What are you going to call it?" He says, "I don't know. Call it the Rippingtons." And so they didn't call it the Rippingtons. They called it Cruise Control.
Okay.
But they said, "Call it Moonlighting." And they couldn't say Rippingtons in Japan, but he said, "Call it Moonlighting." And the title, the record came out, and it was Cruise Control Moon Riding. So the translation worked out that way, and then later signed it to a U.S. distribution deal.
Right.
And that's when he said, okay, for real, the Rippingtons.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Interesting story. Interesting story.
Yeah.
Hey, congratulations. You have the house of your dreams now, don't you?
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you.
I was looking on your website. Wonderful picture. How did that all come about?
Well, it's one of those things when we loved our house that we were at, but we wanted to get a little further out of Los Angeles, where the air is a little cleaner, where the kids can ride their bikes. And we had a great neighborhood, but you still had billboards, you know, on the streets. And my wife, Yvonne, grew up in Thousand Oaks, which has been known for years as the safest city in the country. You know, when they write the things in the magazines, it's right up there.
Yes.
So we spent 3 years house hunting, and we didn't tell our kids. They sort of tagged along and would go to an open house occasionally, and we'd just say, well, we're going to look around. And so we did this in secret for 3 years. But at the beginning, we actually said, we found a street that we really liked 3 years ago, and we said, boy, if a house ever comes up for sale on this street, we will probably buy it.
Yep.
It took 3 years.
But it came up.
And we were very fortunate because thanks to the internet, we were looking at listings every day, twice a day, new listings, you know, just scouring the listings. And sure enough, one night I'm out working in the studio, and Yvonne calls me on the phone and says, "Greg, you're not going to believe this. A house on our street came up." She said the name of the street.
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh." And I came in the house, and there was the listing with the picture and everything, and it said, "Oh, upgrades galore, and the best neighborhood."
Yeah.
Cool. The next afternoon, we go, and our agent, who had been working with us for 2 years, met us at the front door because he had previewed the house. He says, "Oh, by the way, the owner has a music studio in the garage, but he's agreed to take it out if you want the garage back." And I go, "Okay, that's a really good joke. You know, fine." I didn't respond. I just walked in deadpan, like every time you go in a house, you don't want to say, "Oh, this is wonderful. We're going to buy the house.
Right.
You know, let me write a check."
Yeah, right.
So we go in deadpan and walk through the big, giant 2-story living room, and Yvonne and the agent, they walk around the corner through the laundry room to the garage and look in.
There it is, huh?
And she looked, and there is half the garage is already turned into a studio. He wasn't making a joke.
No.
She breaks down crying, and I said, "Don't, you know, be cool. You know, the owner, I mean, the other agent is in the other room."
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, this house had a studio, and it wasn't quite as big and nice as this house that I had been in for 15 years. But hey,
it works.
It worked. I've expanded it since.
Good.
And we're just thrilled. We live next to nature. We have a mountain and a park in our backyard.
And that's way cool.
And we're there.
Good. Well, thank you for taking time today and sharing a little bit about you, what you do, where you live, and all that good stuff. Much success, Greg.
Thank you, Diane. My pleasure.
We're coming to you from the Berks Jazz Fest.